So we have the full 6 of us. So this is a call to order. It's now my fault, 7:06 p.m. on December 6th, 2022. It's a virtual meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals, Town of Cohasset. So we will begin our sessions with the first on our agenda, a special permit filed by Heidi Condon of her firm HC Design Inc., representing Hollis Honeywell for the raising of the existing home above the floodplain level to construct a new garage porch and deck within the floodplain at 91 Atlantic Avenue. Okay, so Heidi, could we promote Heidi and see if there's any new material provided? If not, we will.
Brendan Sullivan's going to be coming in as representative.
Okay.
Sorry, good evening. Brendan Sullivan here representing Hollis Honeywell for 91 Atlantic Ave.
Okay.
I think the only thing you're waiting for from the last meeting was we were back in front of the conservation for a stormwater permit. We did get that. We just got that as recently as a couple of days ago. I have not forwarded to Cassandra just yet, but I certainly can.
Okay, now just give us a heads up. Was there anything in there that might impact? We have a draft decision before us to discuss that Charlie Higginson has drafted but without the benefit of that stormwater permit. So
I know it was pretty consistent with the notice of intent filing and the notice of the ZBA plan as well. So
okay,
there was no.
When it comes time to deliberate, we can always sort of have the proviso that this be incorporated or at least acknowledged in our decision, and if there's any impact on the actual conditions, we can make such a change or continue that.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Charlie, are you okay with that one?
Yes, when we discussed the decision, I got a request to Brendan.
Okay, well, when we discuss the decision, we really can't invite Brendan to comment, so why don't we do it now?
Okay, Brendan, and writing the decision, I had difficulty to explain why the site plan cites 9.5, and I believe you said something to the extent that 9.5 equals 10, and I would like a citation and the rationale.
Sure. So that's really just a conversion. So the elevation 10 as referenced in the zoning bylaws references mean sea level, which is a 1929 reference. The elevations on the plan are more updated, and it's NGVD 88 as we call it. So it was based on an elevation datum that was done in 88. So the conversion difference for the town of Cohasset is approximately 0.8. So that elevation 10 is the same as 9.2 datum for what's referenced in the zoning bylaws. So we're having the basement, the garage slab at elevation 9.5.
So that datum has actually gone down, interestingly, in an era of global warming. Is there a scheduled kind of successor to the 1988?
No, so really so it really hasn't gone down. So if you think about it, the base has come up, therefore the elevation, the distance is smaller. So now it's 9.2. So okay. So the sea level rise has come up with between sea level rise and they NOAA did it was a more of a change all over the United States. In some parts of the states, it's not a change of 0.8 everywhere. You know, in California, it might be a change of 2.3 feet. In Florida, it could be a change of 0.1 feet, and it changes everywhere you go. It's based on the It's based on the global positioning and how the
So
How
it's a
the
net
earth-
difference. In a way, are you saying it's a net difference has gone from 10 feet to 9.5?
9.2.
9.2, okay, I mean.
Yep. Yeah.
So it's shrunk a tad and then,
Right. If that
okay,
makes
well,
sense.
could you provide that to Charlie in writing so that could be,
Sure.
he can incorporate that into the final draft?
Yep.
You okay, Charlie, with that one then, if he gives you a wording reference? But I mean, isn't it astounding that we have a 1929 data point? It's only 97 years ago. I mean, good Lord, in our
Right.
bylaws, I mean,
The simple thing to do with the simple change in the bylaw would just be to reference the 88 datum, probably.
yeah,
That's the most
I
recent.
would think so. Cassandra, could you just sort of make a little side note? I will too, that with the bylaw, zoning bylaw committee, maybe we should make a request that the datum be referenced to the 1988 and not get into the actual footage, but just the survey at that point.
Sure, making a note now.
Probably easier than next time they ever do this to flex it. Okay. So that's it. Anybody have any other questions before we will later on get into Charlie's draft, but once we close the hearing, Brendan and I guess Kevin are not allowed to participate. So if there's anything we need from them, let's do it now. I thought it was pretty clear, Charlie, frankly, myself, what you wrote up. What about Brendan? Let me just intrude here. Kevin Asmus, what role, and is he participating or just listening in?
I'm here in case you have any questions about the architectural drawings. I worked for HC Design and
Okay.
did the drawings for this project. So,
Charlie, any questions? I'm turning to Charlie, but really the whole board. Anyone?
No, we've answered the one area that I was confused over.
Anybody else on the board have questions of either the architect or the engineer?
No.
I'd make a motion then to continue, close the hearing.
I'll second it.
Okay, moved and seconded. Woody Chitik, aye. All right, we got a few mutes, but do I hear a unanimous agreement? Good, I heard that,
Dave.
even if nobody else could. It was. Mike, no, I'm not following the legal process, but at any rate, it's been moved, seconded, and approved unanimously by the board to close this hearing on 91 Atlantic Avenue. Okay, second is 534 Beechwood Street to actually the request was to raise the existing structure and rebuild. I think their new modified proposal is to try to protect and restore as much as they can, add on to it, but and then construct 2 apartments in the second floor at 534 Beechwood Street. But the other notable change is that originally the request was for a variance, a parking variance. I think that's been modified now to be special permit for a mixed use, and they've proposed a compliant parking plan, as I understand it. Which one of us drafted? That was Dave. You drafted that one?
Matt.
Matt. Okay, why don't I turn it over to you to, whoever is here to speak on the behalf of the applicants. Matt, you could lead the questioning if you don't mind.
Sure.
Cassandra,
gonna
do we
pull-
have Richard Henderson?
I believe I'm pulling him forward.
Okay,
It's
great.
A Richard.
And I think Brendan was involved in that one as well.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
gonna promote him again as well.
Hello.
Hi, Richard. We can
Hi,
hear you.
guys. Good evening. Do you want me to, I'm waiting for the question, or do you want me to begin?
Yeah, I know you don't have anything new to submit to us, right?
Now, the only thing I was asked to submit at the conclusion of the last hearing was the site plan hearing, and that was transferred interdepartmentally to your board by Lauren to Cassandra, and I assume you all got copies. So that was all we were asked to do.
Okay. Yeah, we
Thank
did get that. Thanks. Brendan, I think the only kind of note I had for clarification is I believe, just so I have it correct, the property is approved for a 5-bedroom septic. I know the utilization is 2 1-bedrooms on the top and the mixed use on the bottom, but is that the correct in regards to the septic?
Yes, 5 bedrooms, and I believe it was the existing 800 square feet of office space. Not office space, retail. I'm sorry. That's what we got.
I think I had the 5-bedroom septic, and I'm just looking for it now. I wanted to say 2,300 square feet of retail. You said 800 though? I just want to make sure I have that right.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. So the existing use, so the approval was for 5 bedrooms and 800 square feet of retail space, but what we're proposing is 2,300 square feet of retail
And the 2
and
1-bedroom.
two 1-bedroom units.
Okay. And the septic that's approved for the, in other words, the new development, one of the factors we look at, right, is just in regards to with 8.7B, the second part, we kind of look at the neighborhood, but also the septic, and I think our position there, or your position there, is it's approved for a 5 1-bedroom and retail space where you're having fewer bedrooms and retail space. So that design is what is going to be utilized for this new development, right?
Yes, that is correct. So fewer bedrooms, more retail space, but the overall loading will be is less than what's there today.
Okay.
I noticed that John Hallen's in the audience. John, do you have any comments on this particular application? I think you may on one coming up, but
I think just on this one, I think they made the change. They added a second handicap parking spot. I think that was.
oh, that's right.
That was the only comment.
Yeah. no, that came up at
I
the
did
last
I did
one.
not add that as of yet. So you can put that in the condition that we could amend the plan for the to make that part of the approval.
Yeah, I had in my notes there John's comment, and I was going to say it might even make sense. Like I don't know. What do you can we do that? Could we still close the hearing tonight, but have the amended
Sure,
site plan?
subject to adding a condition of a second handicap parking space or whatever. I think second.
Yes.
Or an amended site plan? that
Yeah.
just shows it.
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, our town council isn't here, but I think we can do that as long as we acknowledge it.
Yeah.
And we have 14 days if we decide tonight to approve it with, subject to those insertions. and any, grammatical changes or whatever it may be. I mean, sure.
Okay, that's all I had. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions from the board.
Anybody else? Well, if not, let's move to close this hearing, subject to the two conditions or insertions that will be incorporated into whatever draft we decide on tonight. And so I would make a motion to close the hearing at 534 Beechwood Street.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Lee Darstein.
Michael,
All right,
Matt Watkins, aye.
great. Moved and approved unanimously. Okay, let's move to the third.
Oh, thank you very much for your time.
You're welcome. And thank you as well for working with with your clients to, make this much more harmonious, if you will, with the zoning bylaws than the original decision,
Well, no,
and without impairing anything. I mean, I think it's a good project personally.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, but you really helped, so thank you. Okay, so the third one is a longstanding one, and we'll probably hear from Attorney Henderson again at 508 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, which is the use of a hydraulic lift in the storage shed or smaller structure, if you will, on the property. Represented by Richard Henderson. Dave McMorris has taken the lead on this one. So Dave, we'll hear from Richard. I know John has got information on this one, but Dave, I'd like you to kind of shepherd this one through here.
Sure.
Should I begin or you want?
Yeah, I just, with all the time that passed and the paper that passed this, it took me a little while to just figure out exactly what it is we're looking at.
Okay,
And it seems to me that it just pretty much boils down to 97H sub 5. Is that accurate?
I don't have the bylaw in front of me.
It's
I'm sorry, you're saying what section?
the section in the floodplain and watershed protection district. It's basically the proposed use of the land does not derogate substantially from purposes of the floodplain and watershed protection district.
Wait. Okay, so let me again, you're right. It's been a long time. So let me start and then 5 minutes go from when I got first the projects, like 2017. I've really only been involved since last April, I think, but I'd have to, no, I guess a year ago, April. So I've only been involved in part of the process, but the most recent issue is as follows. Peter in 1917 received an upgraded Title V, an order of conditions, a site plan, and a stormwater permit to make improvements to the property. The improvements took some time to develop. During the course of the improvements, the main building was torn down. He began using the storage building for repairs. After conferring with Bob Egan, because there was no place to make repairs, there was no structure, it had to be used. So I guess maybe it was in August of 21. John Cavanaugh asked me to get involved, and I dealt with Jason Federico, and the issue was that the storage building should not be used for repairs because there was no provision in the special permit for that. So I filed at that time to amend the special permit. It was called to a hearing on November 1st of 2021. At the 2021 hearing, it seemed to be going well, but the water department was represented. I think I said John Steinmetz and Mrs. Jenkins, but I think now that was back was Mrs. Jenkins and maybe Jason Federico, who was one of the town engineers at the time. And the request was whatever the zoning board does, they weren't crazy about the whole idea, but whatever the zoning board did, they wanted input. And they wanted the input to be based on their own investigation of the site. And in that connection, they asked for as-built plans, and that's where all the delays occurred because the as-bills were not actually completed until August of this year because the work was, in fact, there's still a little bit of conservation work to be done. After that was received, I met with the town engineer and I filed it with the water department, and the water department was able to see me on November 2nd of 2022, a year and a day after the original hearing. And at that point, I had suggested some conditions that might be viable to everybody, which included if the storage building was used, it would only be used for repairs, did not involve automotive fluids. It would be only diagnostic storage and repairs that didn't involve anything but metal parts. No radiator, no oil, no grease, no propane, no acetylene, nothing of a chemical nature would be used in the building. The board did not have a quorum at the 11/7/2022 meeting, but they expressed their opinions. Mrs. Jenkins disapproved and Mr. Pratt approved with, well, he suggested he would be in favor with conditions. Apparently, there was a second meeting to which I was not invited and I did not receive notice, at which the topic was taken up again. And there was a letter dated November 13, 2022, which I got on that night, which was a Sunday night. And I guess you guys didn't get it, though I think it was addressed to Woody, in which Mr. Pratt expressed that they would be willing to go along with a special permit subject to those conditions. Subsequent to that, at the next zoning hearing, I believe it was Mrs. Jenkins indicated that one of the applications for the project had been completed incorrectly. And that's not true, but I can explain what that's all about. What she indicated is that on the notice of intent, they failed to state that this was in a watershed protection area. I got a pile here 6 inches thick that has every plan, site plan, stormwater, notice of intent, zoning and planning. And on the each one of those plans, the second comment in bold print is locus site is entirely within the water resource district. A portion of the site within the 200 feet of Pepperin Brook and also lies in zone A. So nobody, and by the way, I should carry on to say that the notice of intent, it wasn't answered. The question was not answered properly, but in the order of conditions, which is the actual permit, the space is checked, which says this is in a watershed area. In fact, I'm reading from the notice of intent, and the findings of the Conservation Commission is that this project affects public water supply. So everybody knew, but what I did after that comment was made is I did meet with Charlotte, our conservation agent, and she did explain exactly what the issue was. The issue wasn't with the notice of intent or any other permit or any disclosure. What it is that Massachusetts publishes a stormwater handbook. And in that handbook, it describes different environmental and land conditions. And with respect to those conditions, it's the burden of the developer to describe whether or not he must comply with these various standards. One of the standards is entitled land development with higher potential pollutant loads. Higher potential pollutant loads. That includes gas stations, farms with animals. On the stormwater application submitted with Peter's project, the questions were not answered with respect to question 5, pollutant loads, because the conclusion at the time was it wasn't within that category of stormwater protection required. We all agree now that it is. I've met with Charlotte. All it requires is an amendment to the stormwater permit to address the issues under section 5 pollutant loads, which will be done if, in fact, we have to apply for amendment to the notice of intent as well with respect to the new swale, which is one of the conditions we offered to do. So this issue is not a serious issue because what the stormwater guidelines will require us to do is exactly what we've already done. A, underground storage tanks. B, buffer zones and swales. C, removal of any kind of hazardous material from the building that is within that zone. All of those things are being done. And what most likely, I mean, it's up to the Conservation Commission, but normally what they would do is require that all of those conditions that we're asking you to consider be put in the operation and maintenance plan for the storm water permit. So we have requested that you grant us on the conditions that we went through the other night. A, that there be nothing in it of a mechanical nature involving fluids, that it used to be diagnostic storage and non-fluid repairs. 2, that we improve the swale area, the protected buffer area, by including a new windy swale, which will retard water as it approaches Peppermint Brook. C, that all of the materials that we talked about. I'm sorry. Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, and then I wrote. You asked me to write a letter about materials we agreed to remove, which I did, and you also asked I provide information on Peter's licenses. And so those are the conditions. A, that we remove the fluids, that we have unscheduled investigations, that we have water tests twice around, water quality tests twice a year, which Peter would pay for. The only thing I didn't ask for is I would ask that he gets copies of the reports, and that we do the repairs not involving fluids. We agreed to all of those things, and those would be the same things that we would address, I assume, in the modified stormwater permit. That's all I can tell you. That's what's happened.
I think most of that, the stormwater issues are not our concern. They're not zoning issues.
No, my only point is you might, if you should decide to grant a permit, to say subject to appropriate stormwater, all of their approvals.
Yeah, we always do that anyway.
Okay, all right, fine. Okay, but I can address anyone's concerns.
For clarification, my understanding is there will be now 2 lifts in the storage building and 2 lifts in the main building. Is that right?
That is correct.
I don't think I have any further questions.
I don't have any further questions. I would ask John Hallen, though, who's been bird dogging this for months, to, comments or.
No, my only comment would be, is it, when will, if the decision is rendered, when will the fluids be removed? I would assume oil changes and stuff like that won't be taking place in the storage
Now,
diagnostic area.
it does take some time to move some of the stuff over, but it is starting today. I spoke with Peter today. I should have communicated better. Maybe I didn't, but it has to start now, removing all of the equipment to the other building for those purposes. Takes a while to do it. It's going to take a couple of weeks to get it all over there, but it will begin immediately.
Okay, yeah, that was my only question, just so we kind of, and it seems like Dave has got a list together as well, so we just know what to regulate, and that way we're both on the same page.
Thank you.
Dave, anything else, or should we
No,
close
I'm
this subject to, sorry.
No, I'm fine. I think I've given everything I've been asked to give, and nothing more to
Okay,
say.
well, there may be people in the audience, something I forgot to ask in the other couple of hearings. Cassandra?
Nobody has their hands raised, and there's no one in the Q&A as of yet. So I guess not.
Dave, are you comfortable or not?
I am.
I'll make a motion to close the hearing subject to subject to any of the submissions that we've just talked about, including a list of fluids and other automotive product that will not be allowed in that.
That list was submitted.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, I think we just have to kind of incorporate that and make sure
Yeah.
it's there. So I've made a motion to close the hearing. Do we have a second?
And the only question would be like,
Sure.
then with the timing then, right? As far as what I understand it might, because this has taken a long time. So within the conditions, we could specify when the fluids need to be
Yes,
moved by, and or we could, which might be even smarter, not allow use of the lift until the fluids are moved.
Yeah,
And maybe that would be a motivator, you know?
It's the fluid thing is going to be part of the conditions, so they won't have an effective special permit until that condition's met.
If Rich, if you want to give me a call when it's done, I could go down and just take a look and then at least send the information into the board saying that the work's been done. So,
oh, okay, I'll let you know when it's finished. I'll give you a call, John.
Okay. So I've moved it. Do we have a
Second.
second? Sorry, Lee, is that you?
I seconded it.
Okay, Lee seconded. Woody Chitik, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Few more people
Matt
need to
Watkins,
chime
aye.
in.
Matt Watkins,
Lee Darcey.
Okay, is Charlie
Michael
on?
Dickey, aye.
Charlie dropped off the call.
Hmm.
Oh,
Okay,
he
oh,
just
he was
popped
recused.
back on.
He might have been recused. Okay. The next
Thank you
hearing.
again. Thanks very much.
Okay, thanks. And Mike, this is one of two that we didn't have a formal draft. So I think I had penciled you in for this one, the Wariskis, but we have this and we have the dock hearing on 49 Border Street. That needs somebody to be on the point to draft a decision. Mike, if you're still willing, I will give you a hand when we're ready. I don't think we're ready yet.
On the Horskies?
Yeah,
Okay, sounds
okay.
good.
Sounds good. Okay, and there were two submissions. Actually, one was for a special permit, but as we know, sometime a month and a half ago, they proposed a variance as a more palatable solution. But I guess both of those are active, but they're concentrating on the variance aspect of that. So with that, I would invite them on, and why don't we turn it over to them and see where Attorney DeLisi is going to take this.
Good afternoon or evening.
Whatever.
Woody, I literally just logged in 10 seconds ago, thinking the hearing was not until 10 minutes. I'm just wondering if I missed anything that you want me to specifically address, or if I should jump into this.
I think you should personally. I mean, Mike Dickey is going to write this up when it's time. I will preface this all by saying I don't think we're ready to close the hearing tonight, but nevertheless, I think you put variance on the table as your preferred solution or recommended solution or whatever it is, and we should probably start there. We've heard the special permit arguments, but I think it'd be useful, given that there was a letter from you most recently, only a week or so ago, speaking to variance. So whether that's been internalized, I don't know, but maybe you could kind of reiterate or reprise that
Sure.
point of view.
Absolutely. I might add that I know Jeff Hassett is on this call. We also have our client, there's Pete and Carly, and then also I think Brian Greenberg, if to the extent he's here, he's our builder and may seek to weigh in on any of this. Let me just kind of, again, Jeff DeLisi, Pete, I'm here with Pete Wariski, Carly Carter, Jeff Hassett, and Brian Greenberg. Last hearing was November 15th. Collectively as a team, we presented the variance plan, reviewed my prior correspondence, the variance criteria. We also noted that the town has been provided with 13 letters of support for this variance plan. Since the last hearing earlier today, the Massas, who are our closest abutter along the southerly side yard, and whose house is directly behind this property, sent a letter strongly indicating support of the variance, and which also indicated how they believe that the alternative special permit concept is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. But, kind of stepping back, what's clear to us is that, we're not entitled to a special permit as of right, obviously. And the board may think that our special permit plan is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, notwithstanding the fact that we propose to maintain the exact, essentially the same footprint. And so we spent a significant amount of time fashioning a plan that by any objective measure, not only is not substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood, but which is actually within the purposes and the spirit of the bylaw, and which is an attribute. And so since the last hearing, as you indicated, Woody, I provided the board with another letter, this time addressing the issue of self-created hardship, which was what I perceived the most of the questions to be at the last meeting. And in through my letter, I explained that this clearly is not a self-created hardship, because a self-created hardship requires that the owner do something, take some overt action, I think were the words that the court used, to create the circumstance, which is the unique circumstance of the property. The perfect example of that would be when land is conveyed, and the resulting land that's conveyed off of a larger parcel renders the lot non-conforming. In that circumstance, that's obviously a self-created situation. Here, the soil, shape, and topography circumstances that we indicated at the last meeting and through our correspondence and so forth, all of that existed long before the Wariskis ever became interested in the property. So we provided many explanations of hardship at that hearing, and we focused the discussion on financial hardship. But at this point, what I'd like to do is take a step back and review this application and address the non-financial reasons supporting substantial hardship, because we believe that those non-financial hardships are in and of themselves substantial, even without the need to get into financial hardship. And I wanted to address those primarily tonight. So in order for me to do that, it's important to recognize the realities of this particular property, and just a brief overview for the board. The existing building on the property is a legally protected two-family dwelling. In this zone, you can't have a two-family dwelling with a property of less than 4,000 square feet. While the building itself is approximately 1,400 square feet, or is calculated to be 1,400 square feet, that's 1,400 square feet of living space. That 1,400 square foot calculation does not include a basement. Yet this particular dwelling does have a basement, and that basement has value. It has value because it's a location to put existing utilities such as a furnace and a water heater, which service both dwelling units, and that's one of the things that we have in the basement. And it also has value because it's not just a crawl space, you can actually stand up in it, and it can be improved into a living area. But our expert engineers and the building inspector have indicated that the entire existing house is structurally unsound. We're still, it's unsafe. The unsafe house is in a FEMA flood zone, as we've discussed, which is a velocity zone. And that catapults this property into a completely different scenario. And at the last meeting, we established that the building code imposes a requirement that the home be brought into compliance with current standards. I think John was here and he concurred with that. The current standards would require essentially that the lowest horizontal structural element be placed above the flood zone. And this existing two-family dwelling is on a 3,555 square foot lot. And it's the only dwelling in the entire zoning district that is located in a FEMA established velocity zone, in this entire zone that we could find. Additionally, the two-family dwelling is on a lot, as I indicated, that's dimensionally non-conforming. It is impossible to simply lift this house up and place it onto concrete piers due to the structural unsoundness of the building. Okay, so we can't just simply lift it up. It's also impossible to rebuild it in its exact form onto concrete piers, because the piers mean that the dwelling can't have a basement. And the loss of a basement in and of itself is a significant hardship that's directly related to the special condition of this property. Additionally, even though, you know, we're forced to lose a basement, it also means practically that we have to find a place for utilities. And if the structure were built in its current footprint, the utilities would have to actually be put up probably on the top floor above the flood zone. And in that circumstance, assuming, you know, the need for, say, a modest size utility closet of, say, 200 square feet, 2 utility closets, one for each dwelling, it would be 400 square feet in a house that is 1,400 square feet. And so basically you'd be trading living area to put utilities in it. Whereas in the current building, we have utilities in the basement. But of course, in this circumstance, we would not be able to have a basement. So we also have this issue of safety. If we were to do an improvement to this property that requires it to be brought into compliance with FEMA, which of course we would be required to do by any objective measure, what would happen is that we would lose vital egress on the second unit in the rear of the building because of the slope and the ledge back there. So so the choices, right? What are the choices? So the lot's unique circumstances, either, you know, we know that it forces us to lose a basement. We know that the circumstances force us to lose a pre-existing non-conforming second dwelling unit, which we could, you know, has value, it could be rented out in most circumstances. And we know that the special circumstances are forcing us to lose vital living space in an already small house. I might add that if we were to have to bring it into code compliance, the stairways, which are currently non-conforming, would have to be widened, and we would lose some living space that way. And we also know that there are no guarantees that this board will issue a special permit for vertical expansion in the non-conforming setback, as we saw in the first hearing. And so instead, this variance application proposes to expand a little more into the side yards in a manner that would actually be fairly unrecognizable, as we indicated in the last hearing. Going into that setback would allow us to not have to go all the way up, and it eliminates the otherwise, amount of massing and increase in facade in the non-conforming setback. So any plan, whether it be a variance plan, special permit plan, requires this building to be taller than the existing building, because and any plan would require utilities to be on top. And so even though that's the case, our variance plan is actually less intense, more in keeping with the residential district, because it eliminates a pre-existing non-conforming two-family use and still maintains a New England style. So I guess what I want to say is the point here to be made is that the existing house is not livable. It is in significant decay. It is a blight that will get worse unless somebody like Pete and Carly come along. And whether they own this house or somebody else, one thing is for sure, that absent action by the ZBA on either a variance or a special permit, nothing can be done with this property. And the decay and the blight won't be remedied. It will continue to deteriorate in one of the most important parts. So the hardship here is significant, not just because of the financial reasons that we cited, which were again reiterated in our the slideshow presentation that I had sent into the board, but also because more essentially we cannot comply with the building code and remedy the decay and the blight unless we elevate the house and unless the utilities are entirely above and outside the FEMA flood zone. And so the circumstances of this lot, meaning the soil, the shape, and the topography, the statutory unique circumstances that are required, they combine to necessitate a finding that the strict imposition of side yard setbacks and maximum building coverage would actually itself constitute a substantial hardship. The strict imposition of these regulations would mean that we cannot use the property for residential purposes because any improvement would exceed half of the building's value. The strict imposition would mean that absent the variance, we would be forced to seek zoning relief in the form of a special permit that risks not being issued or being appealed. And the strict imposition would mean that absent a variance, we would lose essential and necessary space that exists in the existing building. It would also mean that the purposes of the bylaw, other than dimensional purposes, which they would be compromised, such as purposes of conserving land value, including the prevention of blight, which is itself called out in the purpose section of the bylaw, and as well as the purpose of preserving the outstanding characteristics and natural beauty of Cohasset. If we had to strictly impose the dimensional criteria and would be forced to go into a situation where we're not sure we can get a special permit, we can't build the building that's there now, and we would need to go up, and that would put us in a difficult situation. But more importantly, if we were denied or if it were appealed and we were to lose that appeal, the purposes of the bylaw would actually be upended in a sense. So even though we believe that there is significant financial hardship that justifies the variance, and we talked about that at the last meeting, Independent of that are the significant tangible hardships that I just outlined. And so we asked the board to recognize those as well as the financial hardships and issue the variance. Depending on the pleasure of the board, I can walk the board through my PowerPoint slides that I prepared for the hearing, or I can answer any questions. But I really wanted to drive home this issue of hardship. Number one, this is not a self-created hardship per the case law. Number two, even if we didn't have a financial hardship, for the reasons I just indicated, we would have a significant significant hardship if the zoning bylaw were literally enforced for this property. And so these reasons, plus the fact that we have unanimous support in the neighborhood, plus the fact that the masses have agreed that that this would be the best scenario. Those are the reasons why we think that this variance is justified, why we think that if this board decides to issue the variance, clearly there's a lot of material here to pick at with findings to justify hardship and circumstance and derogation and the like. So we think that all of the criteria is satisfied, and we'd like the board to recognize that as well. Thanks. Would you like me to go through any of the information that I had provided, such as the PowerPoint, which walks the board again through the criteria?
Well, let me first turn it over to Mike. I mean, I know this is catching you a little unprepared, bless your soul, but what are your thoughts or preferences at this point? I'm sure we all have questions, Jeff, about some of the points you're making, but
Yeah. Well, a lot of information. I guess, and perhaps I'm not fully understanding things. Your letter of November 29th talks about self-created hardships, and you're saying it's separate from the purchase of the property itself. And again, maybe I'm missing something, but as I understand it, you can build a 1,400 square foot place without the variance, but you're creating a hardship because you want to go to 3,000 square feet. So isn't the choice to choose the 3,000 square foot place as opposed to the 1,400 square foot place self-created, or am I missing something?
Well, first off, on the self-created nature, all right, what's important to understand about that is that the best way to what I learned about self-created hardship is kind of the best way to think about it is that it's a self-created special condition of the property, which creates the need for a hardship or creates the need for a variance. That's what a self-created hardship is. And so this is clearly not the case, right? Because the Wariskis have not done anything to create the topographical issue or the soil condition or the shape. Whereas in other circumstances where self-created hardships are evident, there is some action by somebody whose action creates that condition. And that's completely absent here. As far as the issue of the 1,400 square feet and the 3,000 square feet, again, we have no right to build this exact house in compliance with the zoning with the building code. So if we were to if we were to, assuming we could actually take this existing building, which we can't because it's structurally unsound, but assuming we could, and lift it and drop it onto the concrete piers, what would happen is that the height of the building would increase, because you measure height from the average grade, the average pre-construction grade, not from the top of the piling or pier, but from the average pre-construction grade. So what we would be doing is lifting a house and putting it on the piles, and thereby creating the need for the issuance of a special permit just for that. Okay, so there is no right to a special permit. This board may feel that a special permit is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. But aside from that, the fact is that we can't just do that here. All right, we have a two-family building that can't be elevated and rebuilt in its exact above grade scenario, and still be something that we could utilize, because as John had indicated, we would lose access, which is required for safety purposes. If we were to attempt to just simply replace a 1,400 square foot building on the top of piles, we would be forced to lose the space which is part of the dwelling, which is below grade, which is the basement that has value. So you'd be telling us, oh, we'll give you a variance, or we'll give you a special permit to put a house on piers, but only if you agree not to replace the basement space elsewhere in the house that you are putting on top of piers. And that elsewhere location is actually up, which is why we created the special permit application in the first place, why it looks so boxy. And so, we have aspects of this variance plan, for instance, that have utilities on the top floor, right? So a good portion of the slope roof, that top floor, actually, is dedicated to utilities, because we've now lost the space for the utility below the building because we have to elevate the building, and we're forced to lose a basement. And so it's not just kind of comparing apples and apples here. And then when you add on that, the economy of scale, or the financial, what we were talking about, Brian spoke of at the last meeting concerning the cost of this, just to replace a 1,400 square foot building. Now we have on top of that a financial hardship. So there are a lot of factors at play. The need for the variance really addresses it really mitigates against simply going up in the special permit scenario, because what it does is it softens the look. A lot of the facade, that's kind of like the massing feel, the imposing building straight up, is now something that we can mitigate against by going out. And so that's really, that purpose. I mean, if the board wants to grant us a special permit, we would not only want to retain the 1,400 square feet, but all of the basement space that we had, and we're going to need to comply with the code, and that means that we're going to lose space with staircases. It's just not apples for apples at all.
I'm
And I'm
wondering if I
happy
can-
to, and you know what, I know Woody, you're about to speak, but I'm happy to, I know that I hit you with some of these arguments anew this evening.
No,
because-
I
and I'm happy to provide it in writing.
Jeff, for the benefit of the board, I was wrong a month ago in concentrating too much on self-created hardships. I would agree that this isn't a self-created hardship, but it is a hardship nevertheless. And But that doesn't give a pass. It simply says you have a hardship and now, can that comply with either a variance or whatever? But how do you reconcile section 8.9 of our bylaws, which is the reconstruction or restoration of a non-conforming building, with your contention that you can't replicate the existing structure? Oh, and the second thing I would absolutely agree with you is that this building cannot be practically repaired or restored. I mean, something new has to go on here. I'll grant you both those. But 8.9 speaks about the restoration of a non-conforming building, whether in whole or in part, a building or structure. Although I would say that the basement is a building, but who cares? It's certainly encompassed, can be reconstructed, or restored in height, setback, yards, or other provisions if raised, blah, blah, blah. I mean, why do
Well,
you?
the blah, blah, blah part is important. And the reason
Oh,
why,
okay.
the reason why I don't think section 8.9 is something that the applicant could even avail themselves of is because it goes on to say you can do that within the same portion of the lot. And then it says the exterior dimensions of any vertical section of which does not exceed that of the original building. Okay, and so
Yeah.
what I'm saying to you is that we cannot restore this building in its exact footprint without, by definition, exceeding the exterior dimensions of any vertical section. And that is because we have to take this house, albeit in a circumstance where the hardship now is that we don't have a basement. We have to take this house and put it on the piles or piers. And the act of raising it higher than where it is at grade now increases the height and therefore increases the portion of the house within the exterior dimension of the vertical sections. And so that's why we can't avail ourselves of 8.9, but practically we can't avail ourselves of 8.9 because if we, what we know about the building code, and John can amplify this if you want, is that again,
I think one part you're missing, Jeff, is that the existing ceiling height does not comply on either floor, so that the ceilings would have to increase. They're under 7 feet, so you right away you'd have to increase 2 floors. So in order to do that, you can't grow the building and also the members, the floor members.
Yeah, I was gonna say that, John.
Size. But just to get to Woody's point, that's why they couldn't meet that. So that just to again clarify that.
In addition to that, you'd be gaining about a foot to a foot and a half of substructure underneath the first floor system that sits on top of the piles that I think you'd have to consider part of the building. So that in and of itself, I mean, your ceiling height, your framing members, everything's getting bigger. There's simply no way to construct that building with the same vertical section.
Well, okay, but you would agree. I mean, I think the statement was made that there is a basement presently.
correct,
And the basement is part of the structure, the house.
correct.
So if it was raised on top of pilings, the basement goes with it. It isn't that the basement gets discounted. I mean, whatever the size of the basement is, then you deal with the issue of does it comply with height and other, sort of living building code issues.
Right, and what we again, it's not 1,400 square feet if you're counting the basement, number one. So that's all of a sudden we've now increased the size of the structure just because so that we're speaking correctly here. it's not a 1,400 square foot structure. That's 1,400 square feet of assessed living space, absent the basement.
Yeah,
So,
but this, that's why I asked you to sort of reconcile this, because this
Yeah.
doesn't talk about living space. It talks about a building or structure.
right.
And that can be reconstructed, so on and so forth in the same. So that would seem to be an option, and maybe it's not desirable. That's a different issue, clearly, but I think you might be overstating the case that, you know, we can't, we're gonna lose the basement. No, the basement travels with whatever is the
But-
restoration.
But if you're taking the basement in this hypothetical and now you're making it the first floor of a house on top of piles, then you're taking something that is not typically counted an exterior dimension and putting it above ground. It's changing the entire building. I mean, if you want to establish that precedent, I suppose that we can look at that, Woody. But
I'm just saying, I don't see where it talks about above ground or living space. It just says a building or structure can be restored or reconstructed. And to my mind, a building or structure includes the basement. I mean, it's there now. Whether that's desirable or whether that's the best solution is quite another matter.
Well, it says the exterior dimensions though, right? So would you consider
Yeah.
if you were,
I would. I don't think the exterior dimensions have to be necessarily above ground. What if I have a partial basement?
so
But
if
for
something
purpose-
had a 9 foot basement, just while we're in hypothetical land,
Yeah,
if something had a 9 foot basement in the floodplain and then had to be elevated and you already have a 2-story building, you would be allowed to exceed the height restriction in the bylaw by just stacking 9 feet.
if it's a non-conforming building, I don't see why you would have to sacrifice the basement or eliminate a basement that exists. If you're gonna raise the whole thing, you raise it. But I mean, I'm more picking on the statement that somehow we lose the basement. I'm not sure you do. You may not wanna, there may be better solutions. That's a different matter, but I'm just challenging the fact that 8.9 allows the building, the structure to go up or go anywhere on the same footprint and roughly the same part of the lot. But there have been 2 or 3 very clear court cases that say it doesn't have to be literally, you know, to the inch in the same part. There have been cases that have allowed the restoration to go more or less in the same area, but it can be moved. So, I mean, I'm just saying that I think it's an overstatement to say that we lose the basement area, and the basement could be flipped and appear in the top of a building. I don't know. I mean, the way you have proposed it, there's nothing here that says it has to be, the stairs have to be the same or the bedrooms have to be the same or anything else. Interior, we don't deal with the interior as a zoning board anyway. But anyway, I'm just making that point. I don't want to, I mean, there are a lot
No.
of points to make, but-
It's a good point. One of the other reasons why I didn't consider that 8.9 would apply, Woody, is because it also contains language that restoration cannot increase the nonconformity. So, you know, as I've always understood,
Yeah.
the way the board, I know that the nonconformity is the setback itself, right? But the way I've always understood the board is that, for instance, in the typical section 8.7B special permit scenario, the board retains jurisdiction over determining the amount or increase in the volume of the building and the facade of the building in the non-conforming setback. So if you were to take something that is below ground and raise it up in height and put it on the first floor, it will raise everything above it, and everything above it, which is in the non-conforming setback, would now, I thought, under the way you've always interpreted your bylaw, be considered to be an increase in the nonconformity.
It would be an expansion of the nonconformity. Because you're not changing the setbacks. You're not changing the distance on any of the setbacks. You're just increasing the amount of facade on the nonconforming sides. And
I
I
mean,
think,
expanding it.
yes,
It's the same though, right? Like an increase is an expansion, is it not? It doesn't say not, so long as you don't create any new nonconformities.
right, right. I think part of
So,
the problem here is that if you have a 10-foot pier and a 9-foot basement on top of that, and then 2 floors above that, you're going to be creating a nonconformity on height without question.
right. Better stated.
I think to Dave's point too, once you put the basement above ground, it's no longer a basement. So you have 3 floors and an attic, and you can't be a residential zone. You can't do that in the residential zone because aside from the height issue, you can't be more than 3 stories. So that's the other.
Help me where that says in the bylaw.
The 3 stories.
Yeah,
Actually, it's not as you could do it, but it's not a single family dwelling with a 4-story. It becomes
okay, and that's in the bylaw where?
well, that's in the building code, so it goes to. So then they would need permission from you guys to put that, anything above 3 stories, because it wouldn't be a single family home.
So the definition of story in the zoning bylaw, I know John just cited the building code. The definition of story in the zoning bylaw requires that every story have it be at least 50 feet above, 50% above grade. So like a basement would not be 50% above grade. And so, that's something that stuck out at me as I'm looking at it quickly. In the context of this discussion. But again, it would probably, as David had pointed out, create a height nonconformity. And so I suppose that would be a very succinct.
It might or might not. I don't have the data in front of me. I don't think we've considered that, before us, but 9 or 10 feet added on to a 20-foot high building doesn't necessarily put you over particularly with the peak roof, over the 40-foot limit. Anyway, it's I just don't want to see sort of overstatement.
Woody, doesn't that kind of drive us, and maybe I'm not following you, but that kind of gets us back towards the original proposal, right? Which is, kind of making up for the piers with height of the special permit, right? Which kind of creates that stacked tie look. I mean, is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's at 18 feet, which is the pre-construction grade.
Yeah.
You can go up 35 feet to a midpoint of a peak roof, so you can go above 18 plus or 20, if you will, because you need to add 2 feet and then add the rest of it. Yeah, you can go up to 50 feet or more.
So are you?
So that would be like if they're pursuing the special permit.
If they were,
I guess with the variance piece of it, which.
Well, yeah, you're right.
I guess I don't know if we want to debate both of them, but.
No, I'd rather debate the variance.
The variance piece, I guess, where we left off with it last was. They had presented the uniqueness piece, and I think on the hardship piece, we kind of hit pause because a lot of what was being discussed was the financial piece of it. I think it was Mike.
And I don't think financial
a good point.
personally.
Yeah, it's not
day here.
Right.
There may be some. I think Jeff has made a couple of very good points about well, maybe indirect financial implications, but not direct financial hardship, but other kinds of hardship. Safety, egress, so on and so forth, which I think are legitimate.
And
Hardship.
probably some of the pieces that play into uniqueness play into hardship. I mean, I guess I wasn't overly familiar with this 50% rule, but I guess as I study it a little bit, it's really, I guess, the evolution of these FEMA guidelines is what has essentially created the hardship for the property as a whole, right? Whether these applicants own it or somebody else owns it. It's kind of crippled what's able to be done there. I guess the telling piece is it seems to be the only parcel in that district that's, you know, subject to this type of criteria.
Yeah, I would like to suggest, Jeff, by the way, just sort of between now and the next hearing, I would like to see the harbor, let's say from the Veterans into the Mill River. I'd like to see what parts of the harbor and that on that side are subject to this VE velocity zone. We don't have it even drawn on the site plan of the particular property, but the contention's made this is the only single-family dwelling that's subject to that, perhaps. But section 10.
Certainly the only two-family dwelling.
What?
It's a two-family dwelling, and it's
All right,
only.
well, whatever it is.
two-family dwelling. Well, I
It's-
think that's important.
Well, there are other structures. The chapter 40A speaks about structures. It doesn't speak about a dwelling, single family or two family. So I'd like to see what the sweep is there of the velocity zone where it's likely to be, and maybe west of the old salt house, the VE zone doesn't apply, but I'd like to see it drawn on a plan. I'd like to see if the former Mill River Marine is subject to that, so on and so forth, because the law talks about structures. It doesn't single out dwellings as special. It's structures that are unique or not unique or things of that sort are subject to unusual conditions. So we ought to just see it.
If you look, I guess, to the left of where they're at, right, which would be like across from the lobster pound.
Yeah.
You know, like that's a fairly new development. I guess when I kind of walk around in there, I think like, well, that one's not on stilts, right? So that mustn't be subject to it.
It may or may not be. I'd just like to see where the velocity zone is.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, you know, and if this house is kind of uniquely hit with the velocity zone, you know, and you've got a seawall or something, that's one thing. If there are a number of structures that are encompassed within the velocity zone, that's a different issue.
Woody, if you'd like, I can bring that up on GIS quickly. If you want me to share my screen and show you?
Well, you can, but I'd like to see it hard copy as well, so I can study it. But go ahead. I mean, if you want to do that.
So the purple area is the velocity zone, and it's hard to overlay the two, but basically the subject property here is here at 49.
Right.
It's the only home that's in that velocity zone. You have the bigger restaurant across the street, and then one of the other commercial buildings down the road.
Right. So you have other structures in that velocity zone, and that's what the law really deals with, is structures, not dwellings.
But you only really get the structures within this narrow path of where you'd see wave action.
Okay, but it's not unique. I mean, you know, it may be semi-unique, it may be unique, but I'm not necessarily seeing it. Because other structures are also subject to this VE zone.
John Hallen, John, isn't the 50% rule regarding the substantial improvement language, that is the 50% rule, isn't that in the residential code and not in the general code?
No.
I believe it's in both, yeah.
It's in both.
The floodplain, yeah.
Atlantica for sure is subject, or that former property, to the 50% rule.
Yeah.
They all are. But at any rate, I mean, that's just another issue. You know, it seems to me, and I'm jumping in front of Mike, you've proposed two solutions, one of which is I'll go up. This is the one of back in September, high to develop more living space. And the alternative was to go out wide, 4 feet in one from the sideline in one direction and 5 feet from the other. That seems to me that it goes beyond some sort of de minimis encroachment or increase. I mean, Jeff, there are a couple of cases that have talked about de minimis, but they don't use the phrase de minimis, but very minor further encroachments.
Well, I
This is
think
pretty
that-
serious. Why couldn't there be a combination of a little of more height, not all the way up to your original proposal, and widening, but in a very small way, like a foot or two to the side increase? In one side, you're going from 15 feet to 5 feet. That's a 10-foot or a 2/3 increase in the nonconformity.
So a couple of things. One, the language of de minimis is something that, I use to characterize the amount of an increase within a nonconforming setback from time to time. I'm sure you've heard it from my mouth. I'm sure that there's case law that uses the word or the phrase de minimis, but it's not language that is, if we're talking about the zoning act, right? You just referenced 48 section 10 applying to structures. Well, it applies to land or structures, I might add. But it doesn't use the words de minimis. It doesn't say, variances shall only be issued in circumstances where the variance is de minimis. So the Zoning Act was amended in 1975 because prior to 1975, it had language that was vague, and what was happening was that towns were naturally using the vague language to justify the variance. And so in 75, the act was changed to make certain that instead of saying unusual conditions, that those conditions that are unusual have to be, joined with soil shape or topography. It has to be one of the three. I don't know how you have an unusual, and there's no case law. I actually looked into this. There is no case law where the structure is unusual soil shape or topography. So no one really understands what the meaning is of the word structure there. But the reason why we didn't take a hybrid approach, we didn't propose something different, is because we have made a good faith effort to reach out to our neighbors and understand what is the height that you can live with, such that you don't think it is impacting negatively.
It may not impact them at all.
We came up, hold on, we came up to 51 feet in elevation. And so that's, I'm just explaining, that's why what we did is we said, all right, we can go up to 51 feet because that's in our conversations with our neighbor, that's the level, the threshold that we determined. And so in order to do what, live where we want to live and have that's why we had the limitation of 51 feet. We would be well exceeding 51 feet if we were adding a third story, and it's just going to launch us into a negative scenario when it's not necessary. And as far as the I just want to get back to section 8.9, because you kind of blew my mind, because in section 8.9 that essentially that provision basically says you don't need a special permit if you reconstruct the building.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that is that we essentially could put this building on piles to make it conforming with the zoning bylaw in its dimension currently. And we don't, even if we exceed the height, we don't need a variance. And even if we increase significantly the amount of the massing of the building within the non-conforming setback, we don't even need a special permit. So we could just literally apply for a building permit tomorrow. If we
If it were in the same spot, right, and the vertical dimensions were not increased. Those are the two conditions, roughly. Yeah, you could, it's a by right, but there may be other solutions I'm suggesting. But I think that there have been, while there is no definition of de minimis, I would agree with you. There have been court cases that have said, look, if you do a little, and don't ask me what a little is, it's up to the zoning board to decide, but I'll make it up, a foot or so. You can encroach in the sideline a little bit, but if you do a lot, you're going to need some sort of relief. And I'm saying that you're creating you're really exacerbating a variance. So why not consider, on the one hand, just replicating the size of the building that's there now? You can do that. That doesn't prevent anybody from living in it. It doesn't take any rights away from owners. Or consider a hybrid. That's another alternative. But don't go right up to the lot lines, because the people in back are not impacted at all. I mean, it's nice that this doesn't bother them, but they're not in a position to be bothered. So I'm not particularly taken with that argument. And if we start allowing people to encroach on or in setbacks to this extent, it's not going to stop. People are going to, while there's a principle in zoning that there's no such thing as a precedent, I would suggest, yes, there is, informally. And I've got a third solution for you to consider, and that is, why don't the Wariskis consider buying property from number 51? It's a 2-acre plot. No, I mean, no. They could expand the width of their lot.
I laugh, Woody, because we that was a conversation we had. We actually drew up a site plan to propose that and went through some negotiations, and the owners of 51 decided they did not. They weren't interested.
No, I can appreciate. I mean, that's their decision.
I just wanted to say that we did. I'm chuckling just because that was like, hey, that was literally our first thought as well. Like, hey, we can, try to buy a little parcel here and figure it out.
Sure, all you need to do is buy 30 feet and you'd be home free.
Right.
No, I mean, I'm not trying to be glib about it. I mean, obviously,
I know
that's all right. So they're not interested in selling, but I'm not hearing solutions that necessarily prevent the owners from using the property that they've bought. I'm hearing arguments to say, I would like to use it in a more expansive way, or a way that suits my lifestyle more, but it doesn't prevent them from using the property that they've bought. But there must be some creative solutions here that I haven't seen yet.
So at the last meeting, we showed you this screen that's in front of you right now with the Mass GIS. In order to drive home the point that, when you expand towards the sidelines on this particular piece of property, it's fairly unnoticeable. And that's because there is so much space between this house over here and this house. And there's a decent amount of space between here and here.
Sure.
And so even though you have characterized this to be more than a de minimis encroachment into the side yard, I don't know if in fact I would agree with you, because we have to take into consideration everything around us in context. And so I think it is a fairly de minimis ask in light of this. And I think the masses pointed that out in their letter to you today. And
They're not
Yeah.
impacted. Here's the thing. Right now, yeah, you go to number 51 is far away, and number 43 or whatever the heck it is, or 45, but the house next to it, that's a small lot too. It's 20,000 feet, at least it's undersized. But I don't know what's going to be proposed there in 5 years on either side of them. And the people who own the property on either side have every right to build a conforming house that's, what is it, 20 feet in this district, I think it is, side yard setback. So the fact that you can't see what's being proposed right today might be very much in your face if you're 5 feet or 4 feet from a lot line. When these houses turn over, and all houses in Cohasset sooner or later get sold, and I mean, that's just the nature of the beast.
no,
I'm concerned about down the road. I'm not concerned about so much today. I'm concerned about what happens if I'm a landowner that buys to the south of or whatever we are, southeasterly of this, and want to build a house because of view or whatever else, right? But I want to build it conforming, and I've got a house that's right in the lot, a neighbor that's on my lot line.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of things is just want to point out a few things that I'm looking at and seeing here is it doesn't appear to be uncommon for properties in this particular area of town to actually have not just go up towards the property line, but go beyond it. We have it here. We have it here. It looks like you have it here. Got it down here. So, and that's not necessarily, responsive to your question. I'm just pointing it out.
Well, of course.
It did just appear to me that,
but
while
Jeff,
we don't,
would
while
you
we don't
want us
use,
to be approving changes, variances to the zoning law to conform to pre-existing non-conforming houses built 150 years ago, and that makes it okay to allow a house to go over a lot line that the zoning board would endorse? The bylaws were created, the setbacks. I mean, I didn't, none of us here on the meeting tonight had anything to do with developing setbacks or whatever, but they were done with some concern about space and style. I can't see the zoning board approving a lot of big nonconformities. I mean, big increases in nonconformities. If I owned this house over here, well, you can't see where I'm pointing, but that kind of slops over the lot line, that's a happenstance of something that happened, I'll bet you 150 years ago. Doesn't matter when, but it certainly predates zoning.
so you mentioned the term de minimis, and the best way I can answer that is that the language in 48 section 10 concerning variances talks about issuing a variance without substantial derogation to the intent of the bylaw. And so I think that the best way to look at de minimis is really not to look at, is it a de minimis amount? It's more appropriately looked at is, are you substantially derogating from the intention of the bylaw by doing this? And substantial derogation versus de minimis are I think probably different by definition. But if you looked at it from that perspective, perhaps there might be some more wiggle room there. I just, I look at this property and I see a situation where the town has the ability to fashion a good result, not just for the neighbors, but for the town also in this circumstance. And it is completely justifiable to issue a variance here. I mean, this screams for variance. This is the only other situation I've ever had that screamed for a variance is putting a house on an island, because an island doesn't have frontage on a road, but had plenty of upland and there was access. So like in this circumstance, if you do nothing, if you don't issue a variance, this property just continues to be an eyesore. And it gets
Why?
worse.
Why can't somebody reconstruct it and live in it?
Because what you're suggesting is to do something that, number one, either we do as of right, which is going to really put us at odds in the neighborhood, and I'm sure will be appealed, and somebody's going to appeal the language concerning 8.9 and its application to a scenario where there's a basement. But you know, more likely what you're doing is putting us in a position where we're applying for a special permit for essentially something very similar, if not the same, as what was previously put forward. And the reason why has nothing to do with the intention of making this a 3,000 square foot house versus a 1,400 square foot house. It has everything to do with keeping it a 3-story house, but above grade. And we would come in for a special permit, and the way we would justify a special permit with such a large increase in volume and massing in the non-conforming setback is by saying, hey, it's either this or we go in and we do it as of right and we go 45 or 50 feet high. And that's not a situation that anybody wants. And it still puts us in a scenario where you could deny it, or, you know, you've already said that you didn't care for the prior plan. It's just not. I think you have a scenario here where you can fully justify the grant of a variance. We've given you, forget about hardship. I mean, we've given you all the criteria. We hit everything. There's no reason not to issue a variance here. You don't have to worry about precedent. No, anybody else who comes for a variance for a side yard setback is going to say, oh, you did it on 49 border. And you know what you're going to tell them? Oh, well, let me tell you about 49 border because it was very different than what we have here. And you could do that with a straight face. You have a property that's sitting in a velocity zone. The house. So we can go back and give you more data, but ultimately we're going to ask you to vote on this application. If for
Okay,
no
well,
other reason-
I've raised it. I'm not gonna, I'd like to hear the board ask other questions. I mean, I'm not sold on anything yet. I'm just trying to suggest some alternatives.
So going back to that
I don't
the
think
discussion, going back to the discussion earlier about the future development of the lot immediately to the south and whether that would ever be built up and look dense. That lot width is only about 130 feet. So due to the lot width requirement of 125, due to the lot width requirement, you couldn't fit more than one house down along Border Street in line with this home. And even that would be unlikely because if someone were to further develop this lot, they'd want to put the houses up on top of the hill and get the views. But at max,
Okay.
do that one. The other point I want to make is I was just looking closer at that velocity zone that I brought up earlier. This house is elevation 18. Those other two structures that we were talking about had an elevation of 15, 3 feet lower. So this is the only structure with a velocity zone of 18.
Give me that again.
So I noted before we looked at the GIS map and saw that the commercial building across the street is in the velocity zone, obviously right on the water and in front of this property, but it's actually in an elevation 15 zone as opposed to an 18.
So the requirement, the FEMA designates different requirements of height above sea level to denote the velocity zone. And in this particular area, the designation is 18. And in the areas that that Jeff was pointing out previously, such as the mill building across the street. Jeff, are you saying that that's in the 15-foot VE elevation zone?
Yeah, on the other side of the white line here, it goes to a 15, correct?
Okay.
And then over here on the other side of the white line over here is 15 as well.
So
So
our
the
property,
Atlantica or former Atlantica in this property and whatever.
That's correct.
Okay. I'll turn it over to the rest of the board. I mean, I just am pondering options. Well, don't speak all at once.
No, I mean, I said a little bit before just about hardship, and I think this, obviously, this design, I think, is a lot more favorable from what we've seen before. That doesn't mean that we have to issue a variance for it. It has to meet the different criteria that spell out a variance, but I was just thinking back to the last meeting where, and we haven't deliberated, but I think kind of the take of the board was just that the financial piece wasn't enough to move the needle, kind of, and that's probably where the self-created piece of it came in, but when you look at the case law, a lot of the self-created stuff is like, I might own a parcel and divide it up into 3 and then come up for the remaining piece and try to make a case that I have a hardship, that I mentioned it before, but I really think like just the evolution of the FEMA process is kind of the true hardship that has kind of wreaked havoc on this parcel. And it is unique that and I guess it's smart that we requested the data, but just to verify, but if it's the only residential, kind of single/double family home, multifamily home that is in that velocity zone, that does help with the precedence piece of it. I'm not offended by like the side setbacks, although I do get Woody's point of, we kind of look beyond just today, but I think I mentioned at the first meeting, it's a pretty forgiving property as far as expansions in the side setback. And I guess we just have to, I'd be curious to see what other people think, but I think we probably knew going into it, variance tests are pretty tough to meet, and kind of hardship is always the knockout one. And that's why I guess I keep kind of coming back to, did they do a good enough job talking about, because keep in mind too, the hardship piece reads financial or otherwise, right? So financial is part of the picture, but for me and probably many other people, it doesn't fully move the needle. So I don't know what other people's thoughts are now that we've kind of dug a little more into it, but that's my piece on it.
So does Dave or Charlie or anybody, Lee, wherever you are, have any comments, points of view?
I see Lee's hair.
What?
I see Lee's hair. I don't see Lee. I think that's her hair there.
Oh, Lee has got her video off.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm looking somewhere else. Okay.
I think Lee's got her video. Yeah, there you are.
I lost my internet, so.
Okay.
Dave or Charlie, you out
Yeah,
there? I see Dave.
I've got a comment. I think the fact that this particular building structure it's absolutely totally impossible to replicate it. It's not an 8.8
9, yeah.
8.9 situation, because it just can't possibly be replicated by putting it on the same footprint. And a lot of that has to do with the flood regulations. But it also, I think the argument about the loss of the basement is clearly something that is a financial hardship, because I agree that it does have real value. So I guess if you do count the basement, that It's more of a 2,100 square foot house currently. I think that it's important that whatever goes in there fits with the neighborhood. Keeps the neighbors happy about what it looks like, and is practical and works. The main problem I see is that the lot is so small that, to make anything actually work there, you're essentially, for all practical purposes, taking property from your neighbor because your neighbor is far away, you're getting to use the benefit of their being far away to create some kind of a de facto setback through the variance. I don't think that that's a great concept, and it's certainly not anything we would want to have as a precedent. But it is possible that this situation is so unique that it fits. That's my current thinking. I want to think about this some more.
David, as you were speaking, I was thinking about the issue that you just raised about the setback, and I'm not terribly familiar over on this side, but my understanding of the topography over here is such that it's almost impossible to have a house in this area, and that if that's the case, again, this concept of, if we're talking about a substantial derogation, at least in this direction, if it's not likely that a house is going to come close to the side yard over here in the future, I think that's something that might be helpful for the board to think about as well when assessing substantial derogation.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I wanted to mention.
I think it'd be helpful, Jeff, if at our next hearing, if you could provide, a little more visual or factual evidence to support
Sure.
that.
Absolutely.
I mean, but of course, we all recognize, I think, that it's amazing to me what people can build on when I won't cite any particular pieces of property, but things I would have said, oh no, nothing can ever go there. All of a sudden, the blasting goes on and there's a house. So at any rate,
If you get a whippersnapper like Jeff Hassett involved, you probably can figure something out.
Oh, I know, that's
Well, we
dangerous.
actually looked at this one in
really
detail.
dangerous, I know, but don't give them any encouragement.
No, we mentioned the first approach was to approach the neighbors and ask to buy a portion of that land. So at that point, we did look at it in detail to make sure, hey, if we were going to take even just a small piece of that land, would it prohibit future development on their land and devalue their land anyway? And we found that it wouldn't.
Well, okay. I mean, I don't want
Because
to.
basically you have 130 feet of width at their narrow point. So you can either build one house up front and comply with the width, or you do two 50-foot more retreat lots and do another house out back on the hill somewhere.
You're thinking that maybe the greater value toward Border Street is a subdivision?
Yeah, but even if that were the case, even if that were the
a pretty
case,
big hill though.
even if that were the case, again, we have some data here, right? We have the velocity zone extending into that neighboring property. And so all in this area over here is the velocity zone. So why anybody would put a house or a portion of a structure on piles over here when you have all of this land, and it's another data point that I think makes sense to look at. but I'm happy to, we'll provide, Cece, we can provide Woody on that. And I don't mean to be overly argumentative with you.
You're not. I don't take any of what you're saying as being argumentative. You're making points and as it should be.
Yep.
You know,
Can
I
I-
mean, what I'm trying to do is I don't have the answers. I'm trying to stimulate. Isn't there some sort of other solution kind of sitting out here? Maybe, and I don't want to get into money issues or neighbor issues or anything else, but isn't there something that would enable us to approve this without running a house within 4 feet or 5 feet of a side lot line, which is really, makes me uneasy. That's all. And I,
Mr.
somewhere
Chair,
there may not be another solution. I don't know. And we'll have to deal with that then if there's no other solution, but maybe there is. I haven't heard from, well, Charlie, I guess, I don't know. And Lee, do you have a point of view on any of this?
I don't have any comments.
Well, all right, I've asked, I would like to at least see a hard copy or something. I appreciate the visual here, but I'd like to just look at that VE zone, and that helps clarify. I didn't have the benefit of that really beforehand. And
Mr.
I
Shinner,
might
can I
suggest
make,
lot width may not be quite as big a deal as you've made out, Jeff, but I mean, who knows? Who knows?
can I make a couple brief comments?
Please.
Do you mind?
I don't.
Just in because you're talking about other solutions, which, believe me, we agree. We've tried to think outside the box here, and this goes to Mr. Watkins' point earlier too. I understand the financial hardship argument didn't seem to move the needle. I'd love to take another crack at moving that needle because it goes directly to the alternative solutions argument or question that Woody's asking. I think the issue here with trying to think of alternative solutions outside of a property purchase that was a non-starter, but we did consider, is that anything that you do on this property is going to be really expensive. And I get that the initial response to that is boo-hoo, sorry that you have to spend a lot of money to build a house, but it's a little more than that, because I think I'm not a lawyer, thank God, but the standard isn't one of the standards we're shooting for here is reasonable use being allowed, right? So when you think about reasonable use and you think about, forget the Wariskis, let's say they decide, you know what, we've had enough of this, let's sell it. The next person's going to come along, regardless of whether they have 5 kids or 0 kids, or they're 75 years old or 30 years old. They're still going to face the same exact financial reality here, that you're going to have to spend, upwards of whatever it is, $2 million to end up with a property that's worth 1.4. And so what ends up, and let's just take my sort of analysis of that as stipulated for the moment. If you want to challenge that, that's fair enough. But what ends up happening is that the property remains as it is, because in order to reasonably use it, a reasonable person has to make a decision about what they're going to do with their money. And a rational actor is simply not going to build a 1,400 square foot house on this property. They're just not. And so it ends up sitting there and passing from owner to owner, and probably people take another crack at the zoning board. Maybe the membership changes. Maybe
Oh, it
people
will.
think yeah. So I mean, that's I get it.
Yeah.
That the sort of visceral reaction to mentioning money is again, why is that our problem? I totally get that, but I do think I get it. You guys get it. I serve on boards myself. I get it. You're inundated with paper. It's very difficult to read through everything in detail, but I would humbly request that you take another look at the sort of financial analysis there and see if maybe it can gain a little more traction with you. That's all.
Okay, but I mean, the only thing I'd challenge you on is is the premise that somehow I put $2 million into this and it's worth 1.4. I don't buy that at all. I think if anybody's going to buy this now or in 10 or 20 years from now, and it costs, and I hope it doesn't, but let me just use that figure of $2 million. I have no earthly idea, and I hope it does. You'll get the money, whoever it is will get the money back. I mean, this is a unique piece of property. I'm not worried so much about, it may be a present financial burden, but believe me, if and we're not talking about a 1,400 square foot house. I would agree with that, that's undersized by any current standard. But
It's a unique piece
I don't have an
But then-
answer, I mean, I'm not a debate.
But then you go right back, and this is, I sympathize with, so what happens is we sort of pinball back and forth among these problems because, okay, so you say, all right, I'll give you that, the 1,400 square foot house, but the problem is we don't have the right to build anything except that. And I think, the 8.9 argument, while it's interesting, I think Jeff DeLisi is correct in saying that, I mean, if I'm in a butter, I'm licking my chops to challenge that building permit, because I'm going to go into court and argue that, you're talking about a vertical exterior section of a building. And I think it's at least, I would hope you'd admit it's at least arguable that, somebody could say, well, how is going all the way to the basement floor considered the exterior section of a building? And so, I don't think we need to get back into the weeds there, but I'm just saying that we have ping pong quite a bit.
Keep in mind, the bylaw doesn't say exterior.
It does.
Not really. Not really. You're talking about 8.9?
Yeah.
Um,
It says the exterior dimensions of any
the
vertical.
exterior, I'm sorry, yeah, exterior dimensions of any vertical section, and what would you call the outside of a basement, even if it's got some or all of it covered with soil? It's the
I would say
exterior.
that if I were reading that, just a straightforward reading, a non-lawyer, again, I would argue that is asking you to measure from grade, because the exterior portion of the basement, because otherwise then you can make the argument about all interior space. Well, it's just covered by cladding, it's just covered by shingles, it's just covered by soil. You
Yeah,
sort of
we do all
you get into like metaphysics there or something.
Plus, I think all of our calculations that we do on height and elevation is at grade level.
Yeah,
Right.
okay,
Yeah.
so.
And so, no, I understand your reticence to, to vary the bylaw for one lot. And I more just want to get across that we did not come, believe me, no one gets up in the morning to, to take on a project and say, let's go get a variance. No one's excited to be here asking you for this. We have put in almost 9 months of work now, like really trying to think of different ideas to make this happen.
Okay, well, if it comes down to, we only have one solution, then that's what you have, and that's what we have to decide. I'm just sort of asking before we meet next month to think about, are there any hybrid solutions that would make it easier for us to agree to this? If there aren't, there aren't, and we'll have to bite the bullet and decide yes or no. And I think we understand the consequences of we are between a rock and a hard place, because the consequences of doing nothing, of allowing nothing is not desirable, and nor are the consequences of kind of wild variances or deviations. But we may have to, I think that's where we'll have to sort of separate and decide. But I just would like one more bite at the apple, if you will. And if there are no other solutions, then no hard feelings. We'll have to make that decision about, are we better off giving a variance or allowing nothing?
And if for some reason I hate that I'm even saying this, if for some reason that the board ends up denying this variance request, I would ask that the board consider containing language in its decision that talks about section 8.9, because I think that it needs to be made very clear in the decision that this applicant has the absolute right, without the need for a special permit or a variance, to take a 3-story building, 1 story of which is below grade, and put it up. And
Well, of course,
exceed.
Dave's interpretation may be more correct than mine, but yeah, I hear you.
Yeah,
And
no,
I
that's
think you're also
important.
getting a sense that if there was a way out, and again, I've not, dialogued with my colleagues here, but if there was a way out or a compromise, I think the board would be favorably disposed. If we wanted to kill it, we would have killed it a month or two ago.
Yeah, well, any hybrid scenario that we bring to you is going to have to be vetted with the masses, where our intention is to give them all due respect. And so they're players here, because the last thing we want is to sit around in an appeal for 3 years. So I appreciate your comment. We'll talk to them and we'll look at the issue if there's anything else that can be done. I suppose maybe going all the way over to the southerly side yard, right up to the property line, and not offending the right side in any way might potentially be an issue. If we've determined that you can't, that there couldn't be a house, directly to the left of this one. So I'm thinking out loud and talk to the clients about it. I appreciate it. I'd be anxious to hear if anyone in the audience has any comments.
I mean, does that, Mr. Chair, does that feel, just because you mentioned de minimis and sort of what, and then you mentioned the word encroachment, I mean, does that
What our
feel,
concerns are, and I would like you to give it, you've got to do the best for your client, and also try to do the best for the board. Whatever we're going to see is not going to be perfect, is not going to be ideal. It'll be, I think, that's all. I don't want to go any farther. I don't want to start judging a possible proposal we haven't even seen.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's entirely possible, though, that we come back next month and say we looked into it and we don't.
Okay.
We don't see
And
anything.
we can't, and we have nothing new to show you. I mean,
Right, but
I understand that's one of the alternatives. Sure,
in
one of the
in
options.
good faith, we'll go back and try to knock heads a little more and see if we come up with anything. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, but as I say, we wouldn't have continued this if we thought it was a, horrid idea and kill it months ago. Not so. Anyway, Cassandra, what about audience?
Yes, Don Massa would like to speak.
Okay. You're promoting her, right?
Technically, this is the father.
Oh,
D-O-N, Don.
him. Okay, the other Don.
The other
Okay.
Don.
He's okay. Well, visually he's
And-
off. I don't know. Is his voice on?
No, he needs to unmute.
Hello,
Yep.
can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, unfortunately, you have to hear from me today, because Dawn has a bad cold, and for the first time in her life, her voice actually sounds a lot worse than mine. What I wanted to say is, listening to all the discussions, obviously, the letter that we sent into you regarding this tried to make a logical point of view from the standpoint of really what's best for the town. And the looks of the harbor area has a major impact on the town, not just on the people who are living there, but everybody who drives by. Everybody who's sitting in a boat on the harbor looking at the shoreline. And there's no question that that the solution that was put in for the variance produces a house which fits in to the looks of the harbor area and the other houses around it far, far, far more than what was proposed originally. And when you brought up the concept of, oh, why the whole thing seems to be sitting around saying, well, geez, you're coming closer than 20 feet from the property line. And said, well, geez, why don't you just buy the land? And then that makes everything okay. When the offer was made to buy the property, it was a lot more land than a 20-foot strip that they wanted to buy. But and our concern was, we sell the land, somebody's going to then be putting another house there. But what I'm wondering is, we have no intention of whether you can physically build a house there or not. We have no intention of wanting to build anything. And would it be possible for us to say, here's where the property line is, here's where the house is next to the property line, that we can put something in our deed that says, I don't know what the language would be, Jeff, you might have an idea on this, but basically say that that there is a zone on the side of the lines there that no structures can be built, which takes into account the fact that if they had bought the land, they have a 20-foot area to the side, then we couldn't build within 20 feet of that. That we just have a zone on the deed that says nothing can be built in there. Then it, in essence, solves the problem of the fact that they're 5 feet from the property line instead of 20 feet from the property line. Something of that nature, something that would be an alternative that would make it work.
Well, Don, I don't want to negotiate in public, but generally speaking, I need to think about it more. I don't want to comment on it at the moment.
Okay, but anyway, I look at zoning. Zoning came in. I remember I was living on Atlantic Ave when zoning first came into Cohasset, and the main purpose for doing it was to not allow people to overbuild and put up structures that could be either unsafe or be totally out of sync with what the image of the town wants to be in that area. And what we're trying to do here is have something which is going to produce something which is going to fit in to the structure of the harbor. And that is in keeping with what is best for the town. And that's why I think it's important that we don't lose that understanding, that we're trying to do something which is going to make it a lot better for the town rather than something which is going to be a lot worse for the town. It doesn't make sense to do that.
Okay, well said. It'd be pretty hard to argue that. Anybody else in the queue?
I can try to speak a little bit. I just, the fact that we totally support and the neighbors all support the variance on either side. The fact that the other structures are further along and that we are willing to put into our deed some sort of fix to prevent any other structures from being built. That solves the issue of encroachment on the sides, really, to anyone else. The alternatives that I've heard tonight don't solve the issue of encroachment up, which goes directly into the privacy and the view and the property value of 51 border directly behind. So you want something that fits for the town. You want something that's going to keep the neighbors happy. You want something that's going to be a good solution. We've come up with a great solution that protects the variance and the build of the variance to be within a certain height for future generations. And we are willing to do something that will protect the encroachment issue on the sides. I think the issue that we have is encroachment vertically as well as encroachment to the sides, but the encroachment to the sides, we feel like this is a solution that we have drafted an agreement that you've all seen. So I encourage you all to take another look at the photos I included in the letter and the agreement that we all have already come up with, because anything other than that, unfortunately, is going to be a drawn out situation that nobody really wants to get into.
Okay. Hear you. Any other comment? Anybody else out there, Cassandra?
No,
Any
it
other
doesn't.
comments from the board? Otherwise, I would make a motion to continue the hearing because I'd like to leave it open in case there are some other, kind of revelations that happen at midnight when you're asleep, and you'll say, I got it, and in which case, hats off. But at any rate, we have a lot of information. We haven't asked for an awful lot more other than something else, but I think we could probably make a determination, close the hearing next month and move on. And I'm sensitive to the fact of, that we have one particular neighbor. I mean, you guys, the masses, are most particularly affected, and the other two abutters on either side are, I grant you, Sylvia and others are far away, but let's see if there's anything else out there. I think if I had a beautiful solution, you would have heard it by now. So I'm counting on Dave to come up with the right solution. He's Mr. Reason. But why don't we continue this, and I'll make a motion to continue it until next month. And if there are no new submissions, there are none, and Jeff DeLisi will know where, we know what we have in front of us and your preferred solution. And if there's something else, modification of any sort, we can certainly consider it then and then close the hearing.
Second.
Okay. Moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Anybody
Watkins.
else?
Lee
Okay,
Darst, aye.
don't be shy.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Okay. Now we have one more hearing and then a couple of decisions, which I think we can run through.
Woody, I'm sorry to
sorry.
interrupt, but technically you'd have to continue the special permit application for 49 border.
Okay, I'd make a motion to continue the special permit, the same address, 49 Border Street, until January.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Lee Darst, aye.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Thanks for catching that, Cassandra. Appreciate it.
Do we
Okay,
know
we have
when the
one more
January, do we know when
hearing.
the January hearing is? Just curious.
Is it?
I believe it's
3rd?
January 3rd.
January 3rd, the first Tuesday of the month.
Yes.
Fantastic. We'll see everybody then. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks very much, everybody. We have one hearing that shouldn't take terribly long. It's by the Allens to construct a dock at 99 Border Street. We don't have anybody assigned, but let me assign this to Lee. Lee, you haven't done a dock decision, but this will be fun because you've got, Matt Watkins, the dockmeister, and Dave McMorris, who can advise you. But why don't we hear from these
As
folks?
long as I have advisors, I will
Woody?
take it on.
You got
Woody?
the best.
Hey, Woody,
Yeah,
can I have a 3-minute recess?
sure.
Thanks.
How about a 3-minute recess for David and anybody else who would like to take advantage of that? Yep, I think he is, but
Just stretching.
okay.
I got an uncomfortable chair that I sit in. Ugh.
I sit in the dark here, but. I assume everybody's going to the town meeting next week. Let's hope.
When is it next week, Woody?
It's Monday, isn't it? The
Monday, the
Yes.
12th.
12th, yeah. There are a lot of things besides the traditional, little budgetary tweaks. So it might be a lively meeting. I don't know.
But you got in the town meeting mandate.
What was that?
Charlie's audio went haywire.
Mike is back, so we just need Dave. Like Charlie has gone away again.
I think Charlie is on. He's on 2 different
Oh, so
Zooms. If you can, Charlie, if you can hear me, the sound, you're gonna have to mute one of your computers. Otherwise, every time you talk, it's gonna echo. Or just log off whichever one you're not using.
You're there, Charlie. I can see you. Oh, he's on twice. I see.
There we go. Okay.
Good. Perfect. So we'll just wait for David. Matt, are you leaving or are you? Okay, he's good. Okay, Dave's back. Charlie's around. Lee's around. I think, well, Lee was. Yeah, there she is. No,
Well, nope.
her dog. There she is. Okay, so we're all back, so we can go to the last hearing, the Allens dock at 99 Border Street. Who's representing the Allens?
I'm going to promote B. Allen.
Are they speaking for themselves?
And, oh, okay. Looks like Jeff is also going to be presenting.
Oh, okay. So promote them when they're ready.
Oh, they've been promoted.
Okay.
All right, Jeff Hassett here on behalf of the property owner.
Okay. Jeff, tell us what you want to do. And also, I know that we had some letters and comments from the public that probably didn't quite understand the limits of our jurisdiction. So maybe you can speak to us about what they want to do within the zoning purview.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So we filed a special permit for a dock in 99 Border Street. And this property has frontage on Border Street at the top of the page, and then it backs up to the Gulf in the rear. And they currently have a pier on the property, which located right here on the plan view. And we also have a photograph of it on the plan. And that pier is, legally constructed as a Chapter 91 permit dating back to 1997. But they only have a Chapter 91 for the pier. It doesn't have a gangway or a float. So that's why we're in front of you this evening. What we're proposing to do is to add a 4x4 landing at the beginning of the pier. And that's something to attach a 3x16 aluminum gangway to, and then followed by an 8x10 float. So this project has really minimal impact because the pier is already in place. We only have to install 3 piles to support that one 4x4 section, which are right here. And the piles are going to be bolted to the ledge. The gangway is, a standard aluminum, and the float is about half the size of the neighboring floats. So this property is in the RA zoning district with a required side yard setback of 15 feet, which we comply with. We're at 25. I'll note that the DEP dock guidelines recommend 25 feet for a small residential dock. So that's where we come up with the number 25. So I'm going to show you a couple pictures of the dock area. So this is the existing pier at low tide, and the float is going to sit right in this area here. The original filing that we made to you had the gangway running immediately parallel to the pier with a float right at the end. And the harbor master actually came up with this alternative design to really tuck the float more out of the water body and into this small cove area here. And then this is a picture at high tide. This is the pier here we're talking about, and the float will be tucked in right in this area where I'm pointing here. So it does not project out into the water body in a way that it would block the channel in any way. So we did get some letters when we initially filed this with concern from the Gulf Association as well as a rowing group, where they were concerned that this dock would block the channel, extend too far out into the water body. The reason for that is about 3 years ago, this is what the previous property owners installed. And it did go out too far. It comes immediately off the end to a very large dock. So showing this picture to be clear, that's not what we are doing. And I showed the same thing to conservation. I believe those abutters concerns have been addressed because they were on the here. They did speak in favor of this design at the conservation meeting last week. But I don't want to speak for them. If they're on the call, they can certainly chime in. But again, minimal impact dock with the pier already in place. It has been reviewed and approved by the harbor master as well as conservation. The next step following zoning board will be to apply for the Chapter 91 permit with DEP Waterways as well as Army Corps of Engineers. Thank you.
Okay, lead questions. Who can lead off?
I don't have any questions.
Are you going to leave the pier as well as add the gangway?
Yes, correct.
Looks like it. Yeah. Okay.
And I know, like, when it gets out that far, it's not in our jurisdiction per se. How close is where the float will be to the neighboring float?
50.3 feet.
Okay. In one of those pictures, it appeared a little bit closer, but okay. So primarily, the piece that's in front of us is the 4x4 landing that's going to be attached to the ledge.
That's correct.
From like a zoning.
And everything else is below mean high water?
It would be, yep, and removable as well in the winter. So mean low water is elevation 0 in this area.
Mean high, or that's mean low you're showing?
That's mean low, and mean high water follows the retaining wall really just behind it.
So Matt, your point about jurisdiction, what we have?
Yeah, I was just thinking, well, and I don't have it right in front of me, but I think our jurisdiction, it would just be pertaining to that 4x4 landing piece, if I have it correct.
It would seem like it, unless anybody on the board has a different point of view.
The pier is already in, the pier is already in place, so it's kind of the addition of the 4x4 landing that would be for us. So I don't think I have any real questions. I guess initially when we'd seen it, it had some concerns that were outside of our jurisdiction. I'm glad to see that they were resolved, because I think they were a public safety issue. So how I see it now seems to be more in line with what would be safe for the area.
Other comments from the board?
To clarify, what we're being presented with tonight is what the harbor master suggested and approved, correct?
Correct.
Well, the portion that's above mean high water. I mean, if you go way down toward the end, we don't have any authority to approve that. That's a chapter 91, I think, isn't it?
It would be, yes.
Yeah. So it'd be a state issue.
It will be, yeah.
So it's very limited, Lee, to
Okay, I just was referring back to
square feet,
Jeff's
actually.
first comment about coming up with a different solution, and I just want to make sure that's the one that we have the plans for.
Yeah.
And I'm just pulling up a prior one to help Lee here too, but do you want to just probably on the plan, Jeff, but you want to review just the ground area, I guess the ground area coverage, in this case, the pier is already built, right? But you said there's the pilings that the additional piers that you'll be adding are all just kind of tie into the ledge, or?
Yeah, I'm proposing 3 piles. 1, 2, 3. That's bare exposed ledge in that location. So those will be wooden piles, but they'll have metal galvanized steel anchors into the ledge, bolted down.
Okay. And probably my pile got thick here, but probably the dock application has that ground coverage square footage.
Yeah, it works out to about half a square foot of disturbance. Yeah, 3 4x6 posts. And I will note that the number of pilings on the original application says 2, but we are proposing 3 now with this modified design.
Okay. All right. Questions? Any more questions? I mean, I think this is this is one of the easiest we'll ever have. So if so, Jeff, as you know, we typically continue a hearing until the next month, and in this case, January 3rd, so that we can review a draft, and at that point, I'm sure we will approve it.
Right. Okay.
So I'd make a motion to continue. I don't expect anything new to come in unless Lee comes up with something between now and then, and she has that right to request more information, but I would
We don't
move
have
to
any
continue
public
the hearing.
comments. We don't
As
have
the
any
public. I'm sorry, I keep jumping ahead. No?
Nope, nobody has raised any questions.
Okay, so I'd make a motion to continue this hearing until January 3rd.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, Woody Chitik, aye?
Dave McMorris,
Matt
Lee
Watkins,
Percy.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Okay. Now, the last pieces of business are decisions. On the agenda is approval of draft decision special permit, but we also have draft decisions on the Beechwood Street, 91 Atlantic Avenue, building in the floodplain there. And Dave's 508 Chief Justice Cushing Highway. Why don't we just take the, so we don't forget about it, the 125 North Main Street draft, which has to do with building in the setback. Extending a nonconformity forward and back in the first floor and building a second floor on top of that. And that was subject to a stop work order until they got a special permit approval from this board. So my draft was to approve it. Basically, when a deeper dive into the case law indicates that there have been a couple of recent cases that have been more liberal in terms of allowing the special permit process to take over when you're extending or a nonconformity. I think going back a few years, we took a slightly harder line in terms of, you know, if you double or triple a volume of a nonconformity, you're really in variance territory, creating something new and different. I think a couple of recent cases have indicated not so. You still need approval from this board, but its special permit approval is substantially more detrimental to the neighborhood. And my finding, I believe our finding as a group was, and helped very much by a 30 some odd property overview. I mean, as we saw in the harbor, most of the neighboring houses are about this height, and most of them encroach on one or more lot lines. So this is not larger nor any closer to lot lines than most of the neighborhood. So I don't see it as substantially more detrimental, but let's challenge that thesis.
No, I mean, I didn't love the result of the development itself, but I think we landed in the right spot for the decision, kind of based on how it played out. I think circumstances being different, I don't feel like I probably would have lended too much to support to it, but I think kind of looking at it with the open mind and kind of considering all the factors that went into it, we landed at the right spot would be my take on it.
Okay. Dave, how do you feel?
I feel like it's a very close call. I think I feel a lot like I felt the first time the application came up, that it's too much. But there are a lot of extenuating circumstances here where I think I can stretch to approve it.
Yeah, Mike, Vicky?
Yeah, we got some thorny ones. We just got off. Well, the dock was, I think, straightforward, but the Border Street home is thorny, and this is kind of thorny too. Not clear to me that the couple intentionally tried to deceive anybody. And so I think I may have to hold my nose and you know, give it a thumbs up, but I'm not real happy. I hope it won't set any kind of a precedent. I think, again, perhaps like the Border Street application, it's unique enough that it will always be able to distinguish it if somebody comes along and tries to say, well, you know, you said yes back then, so you should have to say it yes again, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's unfortunate. But I think it's also an area that if construction hadn't started, I think we would have had a stronger voice at the table.
Mm-hmm.
It's
no question, and if there was, any evidence that they that they were acting in anything other than in good faith, I think it'd be a slam dunk, but not really anything I was able to see that gave me any sense that they were, knowingly acting in bad faith.
Yeah, I mean, you could indirectly, if you wish to, probably doesn't profit anyone to blame the engineer who participated in 9 years ago and on the same property, or the architect who should have known what the bylaws are.
Look, I mean, ignorance of the law is no excuse, and
Yeah.
so I wouldn't argue that someone could come down on the on a different side, but it's a tough call.
Yeah, my one concern in this, although you know where it came out, which is to approve it, is that I really don't know where you stop kind of gradual or special permit creep. There's nothing in our enabling law, chapter 40A, that says you can't come back in 2 or 3 years with yet another sort of minor or modest increase and then come back 2 or 3 years later with the same. I mean, at some point, maybe there'll all be a bunch of different faces in this board, but I hope that we don't do that. Not so much in this property. I think they're well warned, but other places, however. Lee, any contrary points of view? Or Charlie, I haven't heard from you on this one. Well, okay, I would make and nobody's in the audience, correct? Because we have agreed that we would approve it and file it before the end of this week. If you have any edits, please get them to Cassandra and then to me.
I've got one. that I
Okay,
noticed. And somewhere in there you referred to the lawyer for the applicant as counsel, COUNCIL. It should be
misspelling. Okay. Okay, got it.
Woody, just to note, I know that we agreed with the applicant that that was going to be filed by Friday.
Right.
I am not here Friday, so I need everything by Thursday.
Well, you shouldn't have any problem getting it by tomorrow morning.
That's fine. I just wanted,
Yeah.
just in case
No,
we
I
had,
would.
I don't know,
Oh, yeah,
edits or whatever.
it's a good heads up. Absolutely. No, we don't want to mess up on this one. But if you've got, if there are typos, for heaven's sakes, get them to me, Cassandra. Between the two of us, we'll incorporate these. So with that being said, you have another 12 or 18 hours to get your comments to me. I would make a motion to approve this decision as drafted and amended for typo.
second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, Woody Chitik, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Lee Darst.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Okay,
Matt Watkins, aye.
let's go back to our regular order of business. Charlie has drafted an opinion on 91 Atlantic Avenue. He needed a little information in terms of the 9.5 versus 10.0 data point, but beyond that, I didn't see anything that I would change in his draft decision. How about the rest of you?
Me neither.
Nothing.
No, I'm good.
Good.
Okay, I'd make a motion. I mean, if Charlie's there, if he could unmute and vote on it because he wrote it. But otherwise, rather than drag this on, I would, since he drafted it, he's got what he needs. I would make a motion to approve the decision on 91 Atlantic Avenue as drafted and with whatever little amendments will come.
Seconded.
Moved and seconded, all in favor, Woody Chitik, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Lee Darst.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt Watkins, aye.
Okay, the next is 534 Beechwood Street. While they applied for both a variance and special permit, I believe, Matt, your draft, they don't need a variance at this point, correct?
Right, as it unfolded, the variance piece became, non-applicable, so the draft was just for the special permit.
Right.
So I think, it met the
And this will be,
criteria.
and I do appreciate the fact that they've gone a long way at solving the parking problem without requiring special relief. I mean, it's all within the confines of the bylaw, so looking forward to seeing this property take shape and take life. So I would make a motion to approve the decision for a special permit at 534 Beechwood Street.
Actually, just one question on it, what that
Sorry.
came up was, I included in the decision that John had brought up the additional handicap space, and
Right.
I could either, kind of put an updated site plan that shows that if it comes, or, I mean, is it appropriate to condition the fact? that
Yes, I think we heard, wasn't it Brendan who said he would go along with the condition that they had to provide the second handicapped?
He did say that.
So
I
I'll
mean,
just
I
put it
think
as
he might have had a site plan kind of redrawn. I don't know, did anybody pick that up?
he hadn't done one, he said, so.
Okay, well, why don't we approve it with the addition of a second handicapped space, and that will be filed along with the decision.
Okay, I'll just make that.
You got to be able to turn that around in a day or two. I mean, it shouldn't take
Right.
very long. So it's been moved. Second, all in favor, 534 Beechwood Street special permit, Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Lee Darcey.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Pat Watkins,
Okay, and the third is, and Matt, I've got a couple of little typos which I'll take care of offline with Cassandra. I mean, it's a spelling thing or whatever. It's not a big deal. Apostrophe missing, but nothing of substance. Third and last is 508 Chief Justice Cushing Highway, the Capizzoli. Dave has drafted a decision. It will be inserted, Dave, that you will give in that one provision there that talks about no automotive, whatever fluids, such as, but not limited to, right?
Yeah, I think what I'm gonna do, Woody, is where it says in number one condition, where it says otherwise dealing with or accessing automobile fluids, I'm gonna put an asterisk there. And then at the bottom, I'm going to say with the asterisk automotive and fluids include but are not limited to, and I'll put the list in there.
Okay, good.
Okay, and also on the first paragraph, I said something about the application was to allow the use of a hydraulic lift in the storage building. I changed that to 2 hydraulic lifts.
Hydraulic lifts. Okay. And we also heard, and of course, it'll be the occupancy permit or whatever will be conditioned on, as we heard from Richard Henderson, moving all that stuff out, which might take a couple of weeks. But that doesn't have to necessarily be part of our decision. It's just, it has to be out before it can be used. So,
yeah, do we just assign a date to that? My understanding, right, is it almost sounds like without the special permit, it's being utilized currently, right? So
I
mean,
think if we do if the special permit's issued, that at that moment, they're in violation of the special permit, if there's any fluid still in there. So they really can't do anything until they get them out of there anyway.
which takes you where, Dave?
I'm just wondering, yeah, what would be different, right? Then if right now it seems that they're operating.
Yep.
With it, I guess you could tell along the way, like I'm fine with kind of where we netted out on it, and I think it was an improvement, kind of what he did, but I was pretty underwhelmed at how long it took to like restore that berm and put some bushes in. So, and even move that trailer when John was down there for months and months asking.
The trailer's still there.
I could kind of see this like, hey, he hasn't got a chance to move the fluids with yet, but he's still using all the lifts, The other thing I would just probably add into the decision, I don't know if you had it, Dave, was like, and it goes without saying, I know it because we don't control the license, but just that this doesn't indicate that the capacity of the dealership can be modified, right? In other words, you now have double the amount of lifts. You're still limited to what your license.
Yeah,
the
that's,
select board
that's a-
issues. You know,
that's a
some of the zoning
selectman.
thing. Right.
Yeah.
But just so the two aren't in conflict or whatnot, might be worth
Lee
it.
has something to say. Lee.
I'm just trying, I'm on board with everything Matt said and everything else, everybody else has said. I mean, one of the reasons why this thing is just inched and gone on for months and months and months is because they don't comply and they say they will. I mean, we heard they were moving that trailer at every juncture. And I agree that unless there's something put in place that John can cite them for, like, I think we need to put a time limit in, because Richard was like 2 to 3 weeks. I really think that we need to put a time limit in, because I think that they are time challenged.
Like, I don't know if it's too bold to say like that the lift can't be utilized until the fluid's removed from the space as part of the decision, but that.
Try.
That
I
would
mean,
be a
I
way.
agree. You know, I was
The
thinking.
two lifts.
Two lifts. You know, I drove by yesterday and asked myself, why couldn't that trailer be at least put in the backyard? Why does it have to sit out front for a year and a half or 2 years? It doesn't have a for sale sign on. It probably isn't being actively shopped. And, you know, and if John hadn't been so diligent, you'd probably find that trailer being used, I suspect, in some fashion. I don't know. What do you think, John? Do you think it?
Well, yeah, I had him take the cable and power out of the trailer. He had his office in it when we first were there, so you know there's no fax machine or anything in it now. It is kind of frustrating because you know he's operating 2 lifts there now, and there's 3 or 4 55-gallon oil and grease drums. He's doing all, you know, he's changing oil there. He's doing, you know, it doesn't seem to be.
Is there any sort of temporary or you know, any cease and desist or stop work until the conditions are satisfied in Dave's draft, which is to remove all, not some, but all of the fluids and maybe move the trailer?
If they want if they want the garage moved, it's a day's worth of work. If you can't operate the work day, you can't operate the work day, period. So I'm inclined to say we close the garage till they do the move. You know, it seems to be the only way that they get anything done.
I would go along with that, Dave.
Yes.
Can you come up with the right wording to?
Well, I don't think I need to. I think John can just tell him stop work.
Yeah, I mean, because as it stands now, it's a storage garage by the last decision, and it's not a mechanical garage yet because this decision hasn't been filed. So we're kind of, you know, yeah, I don't. They say I don't understand why it takes so long to move it. If they're going to do it, they should have been moving it between last meeting and
I
this
think
meeting.
Lee has got her finger on it, that there is no motivation to change. And they just hope you'll go away or that we'll all go away. In a way, I mean, that's kind of cynical, but.
Well, I mean, they keep stressing that this is so much better than it was. That's why we should approve it. And I agree. I mean, I read David's decision. I think it's good, but I also, I drove by there yesterday also, and the doors were open and cars were on all the lifts, and it's fully functioning without being permitted.
Yeah. John, would it be reasonable to also have Dave incorporate moving the trailer into the back? I don't know what the backyard looks like, but just getting it out front, maybe that'll motivate.
Yeah, the one thing with the trailer, he did have a small for sale sign on it. Most of the reason I had the trailer moved was for use in the location in the conservation area that they were, you know, weren't supposed to be in.
Would that make it worse then if we had the trailer moved to the backyard?
Yeah,
I think our only justification when we moved it was because of its proximity to the Peppermint Brook,
Mhm.
right? I
Yeah.
mean,
I don't
technically,
think
if
we
he
have-
wants, if he wants to sell a trailer there, technically he could, right?
yeah, I think that was the it's a motor vehicle. So
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in our jurisdiction that lets us make him move the trailer.
But yeah, I mean, you almost would have liked to have heard, hey, look, if you issue the special permit, the fluids will be gone tomorrow, type of deal. You know, you're yielded two
think-
additional lifts out of it, and I didn't hear that. I like this. It would just kind of go on and on, you know.
Yeah, I think just, we can, I don't think it needs to be a condition in the special permit. Because the condition is that there's no automotive fluids in that building. So if they're doing anything in that building with fluids in there, they're in violation of this special permit. And until this special permit gets filed, they're in violation of the old special permit. So I think John can just tell them, until everything is out of this building, you don't use those lifts.
John, you could do that. Will they, are you comfortable doing that? And do you think they'll pay attention to you?
yeah, I'll go down probably Thursday. I'm off tomorrow, but yeah, I'll give Richard a call too and let him know.
Okay.
I think it seems to be the only way that we have their attention now. Because I'm afraid once it gets filed, then I just don't want things to go back to the way they've been.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, Dave, well, if there are any other sort of little tweaks you can do wording wise, do it. But otherwise, I think I would certainly approve the decision, and if any other teeth, we could, well, I don't think we can have anything else beyond that they're in violation of a special permit once filed. And that they'll have to stop, or what can you do? Fine them, John, I guess, the usual couple $100 a,
Yeah, I mean, we could. It's probably a last resort.
yeah.
Basically, we just want the action. We don't.
Yeah, we don't need the money. I mean, it's not the point. But
Yeah, I think we can.
it's
as they
getting their
say-
attention to take us seriously, or take you seriously, the water department, and everybody else.
And then we could say, well, upon the action, the special permit will be filed once once you're in compliance.
Would we run into any sort of deadline if we don't file the special permit?
Or the stipulation being that it, for the, I guess it has to be in compliance to be enforced, I guess, or.
Yeah, I'd rather see the thing filed than to have it, miss some sort of a deadline.
Mhm.
Then it would really be up the creek.
All right, well, I on the stop work order, I could cite the permit, the application.
Yeah, tell them, listen, this is coming in a couple of days. I mean, I don't have it right with me now, but I'm coming back, and the permit's been filed and you'll be in violation. I mean, I don't know. I mean, you'll count on us to back you up. It's just, I don't know what we can.
Can we
No.
report it to the license bureau? Will it affect their license?
Well, I think probably the quickest way to get their attention is a stop work order.
Yeah,
And then we could just, in the stop work order, I could just write the stipulations on what they have to do. And we can reference the removal of all the fluids per the zoning.
yeah, I
decision.
think, without beating this too much with a stick, you took some photographs a few weeks ago. I think it looks worse now.
Well, that was just that was Friday.
Yeah, no, your most recent
Yeah,
photographs are worse than the ones I saw 2 or 3 weeks ago. They seem to have added more fluids and taken them away.
yeah.
Unbelievable. Well, anyway, why don't we get Why don't we get rid of this by approving the special permit with whatever little modifications Dave is going to make. All right, so I'll make that motion.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All in favor, Woody Chidick, aye.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Lee Darcey.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Matt Watkins up.
Okay. All right, well, is that approval of meeting minutes November 15th? I mean, I read them, used them.
Actually, can I go back for just a second on
Sure, Dave.
this one? Richard said he gave us a list of the fluids. Is that what he had in his letter, the letter from November 28th?
Cassandra?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and John added a couple to Lee Jenkins' thing. So as long as we have a robust sampling of what we don't want there, but not limited to. Yeah, I think that's right, isn't it, John?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. All right, so he moved and seconded that. I know I'm being if I could invent a phrase, pain in the ass about Border Street. To my mind, I'm hopeful that there is a somewhat more creative solution. But I don't know. That bothers me about these degree of encroachment into the sideline and precedent. And people say there is no such thing as precedent in zoning. And my response is, oh, yes, there is. And but at any rate, I mean, we'll see. Maybe I don't know.
Charlie's a participant now, panelist, I see.
Yeah.
He's popping on and off. I'm promoting him again now.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we'll have to, Charlie, okay, let's hope he. Charlie, can you unmute? There you
Yes.
go. Charlie, speak to us.
What?
Speak to us.
Hi.
Well, that was, hi, and how are you?
I've been watching, but on a screen I've never seen before, and I couldn't. There was no mute or anything on it.
Okay. Well, you've seen all the business that's transacted. And we will, actually, next we have the two assignments to write up. Well, actually, Mike gets a pass because I don't think we're quite done with the Wariski situation, but we have Lee and the doc, and Cassandra says we have a couple of new things, but with that exception, do we want to approve the November 15th minutes?
Sure.
Sure, I'd make a motion to approve them.
One change, Condon was the applicant in 91 Atlantic Avenue.
Okay. So the applicant, she was the applicant and not just the applicant's representative, or the owner's representative?
She signed as applicant,
Okay. All
but
right,
she was the architect.
or the agent, or whatever, that's fine. I mean, she's the applicant, she's, okay.
We have it down now. I think it's the estate of Missy Houghton.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't believe Hollis owns the property as of the application date.
okay, that's fine.
That's
I mean,
correct.
it's a good catch. All right,
Did we have a
Onward.
second on that?
second,
On the minutes, second. Yeah.
all in favor, aye, Woody Chidick.
Dave McMorris, aye.
Matt Watkins up.
Lee Darcey.
Michael Dickey, aye.
Okay. All right, so you have a happy Christmas and New Year, and we'll see you on January 3rd.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to, oh, thank you, Lee. It's been moved. Somebody want to second the motion to adjourn?
I do.
Sure, I heard a second there, second.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, aye. We're adjourning. Happy
Aye.
holidays.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Good
you very
night.
much.
Happy holidays. Happy New Year. Be safe.
Good night, everyone. Happy
You got it.
holidays.
Good night.
The town meeting.
All right, everybody show up.
Yes.